the airplane that landed with 92 skeletons on board. The infamous Flight 513 met with such freak accident that even authorities have tried to keep hidden. It was September 4, 1954 when a Lockheed aircraft was getting ready to take off in Germany. According to an article published by the tabloid weekly World News in 1989, the plane was scheduled to arrive in Porto Alegre, Brazil 18 hours later. Hours passed, then days, and the flight did not reach its destination. It simply vanished somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean, leaving no trace. At the time of the disappearance, authorities believed that the plane had crashed. The wreckage must have plunged into the inhospitable dark chasms of the ocean. For the years to follow, multiple search parties were formed to look out for the remains of the passengers or the plane, but nothing was found. This was a completely ordinary flight and nothing unusual took place before the plane took off. After all, flights like this were taking place multiple times per day, every day this time of year. All of the passengers were ordinary people and there was no additional cargo on board that would cause anyone to be concerned. The weather was clear and uneventful, but just a few hours after the plane took off, it vanished without a trace. The plane had been soaring over the Atlantic Ocean. At the time, so many people assumed that something had gone wrong and the plane had crashed, but there were no emergency calls that were placed by the pilot and no distress signals were received either. Everyone was wondering what had happened to the flight, but no answers would be found. All 92 people who were on board the flight that day were pronounced deceased. The event was tragic, but plane crashes are not unheard of, so what made this flight so interesting? It was the afternoon of October 12, 1989. This was a normal mundane day at the airport in Porto Alegre, Brazil. An unidentified aircraft popped up on the radar. Air traffic control did their best to contact the pilot of the aircraft, but they never received a response. Considering the airport was quite busy at the time, the plane circled the airport multiple times before it eventually touched down when the runway was clear. Since the crew on board the aircraft were unresponsive, the airport sent a team of security workers out to the runway to inspect the plane before the passengers were allowed to exit. As they made their way onto the runway, the workers were left breathless. They couldn't believe their eyes. The side of the plane read Santiago Airlines, but this airline had been shut down since 1956. They also noticed that the aircraft was a Lockheed Super Constellation. Even more fearsome was the flight number 513. What further took the workers by surprise was that the aircraft looked as if it were brand new. It showed no signs of age and looked just like it had when it had departed the airport in Germany 35 years ago. Unsure of how to proceed, the security team decided to open the doors of the plane and go inside. What they were greeted with caused their hearts to skip a few beats. Inside of the aircraft, they found dozens of passengers, all secured in their seats. However, all that remained were the skeletons of the 88 passengers who were on board. As they made their way to the cockpit, they also found that the crew was skeletonized as well. To make the discovery even eerier, the pilot's hands were still gripped tightly to the controls. This incident occurred in the middle of a normal day when other planes were coming and going as usual. Management had no idea how to proceed, so they did their best to cover up the story, until they could figure out what was going on. When news companies inevitably found out about the plane, headlines would read Flight 513 has landed 35 years late. The Brazilian government covered up, and members of the public were extremely disappointed that the government would not allow more information to be revealed. The government only issued a single statement that claimed the plane had landed 35 years late, and they never bothered to explain anything further. With this information being kept hidden by the government, retired physics professor Rodrigo Dimona stated that it is an offense to keep this secret for various reasons. The first is that the crew members and passengers' relatives deserve to know what happened to loved ones. and the second is that such a mysterious phenomenon has to be known worldwide, since it means that the world does this not function as we believe it does, and that it may have serious repercussions on science. Another scientist, Dr. Celso Otello, said that the only possible explanation would be a wormhole or an unexplained opening or gap in space and time. He said that if a plane were to fly through such a wormhole, it would likely send the plane and its passengers traveling to the distant future. Unaware of what had just happened, many people believe this theory and claim that the government is withholding information to avoid a riot or revolt. Dr. Otello says that denying the truth is no better than lying to Brazilian citizens. Throughout the years, many have questioned how plausible this story truly is. Nevertheless, critics of the history of Flight 513 insists that it is nothing more than an urban myth or an attempt to sell newspapers. Flight 513 remains an absolute mystery.